My dad paid full tuition for his stepkids' expensive colleges while telling me, my brother, and sister that he couldn't help with our education costs. When my sister begged for help with basic expenses, he said no but bought his stepson a new car the same week. Some background. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it was messy. Dad, now 52, had an affair with his coworker Sarah, and Mom found out through bank statements showing hotel charges and fancy dinners. The divorce took 2 years because Dad fought everything: custody, alimony, even who got the coffee maker. I'm now 24F, and I have 2 siblings, Jake, 22, and Mia, 19F. After the divorce, we lived primarily with Mom because Dad needed time to figure things out. Translation: he moved in with Sarah immediately and didn't want kids cramping his style. Dad married Sarah about a year after the divorce was finalized. Sarah has 2 kids from her previous marriage, Connor, now 25, and Zoe, now 23F. They were 17 and 15 when Dad and Sarah got married, so they lived with them full-time during high school. Here's where it gets complicated. During the divorce proceedings, Dad constantly complained about money. He said Mom was bleeding him dry with child support and that he couldn't afford to maintain his previous lifestyle. He moved from our nice family home to a small apartment, claimed he was barely scraping by, and made a huge deal about every penny of support he paid. We saw Dad every other weekend, and he always made these comments about how expensive we were. When Mia needed new cleats for soccer, he'd sigh dramatically and talk about how he was already stretched thin. When Jake wanted to do summer baseball camp, Dad said, "We need to be more realistic about our budget." When I needed a dress for homecoming, he took me to Walmart and kept checking price tags while muttering about costs. Meanwhile, Connor and Zoe seemed to get whatever they wanted. New gaming systems, name-brand clothes, family vacations we weren't invited to because it was complicated with the custody schedule. Dad would post photos on Facebook of fancy dinners out with Sarah and her kids while we were eating mac and cheese at Mom's house. The real kicker came during our senior years. When I was applying to colleges, I asked Dad about financial help. He said he'd already talked to Mom about it, and they'd agreed that student loans were character building. He said he simply couldn't afford to help with tuition on top of child support, and that I should consider community college or in-state schools only. I was devastated. I had good grades and had gotten into some really great schools, but the financial aid wasn't enough, and Mom was already working 2 jobs to make ends meet. I ended up taking out massive loans and working throughout college just to get by. Jake went through the same thing 2 years later. Dad gave him the exact same speech about character building and financial limitations. Jake ended up at a state school that wasn't really what he wanted, but it was all we could afford even with loans. But here's what really gets me. Throughout this whole time, Dad was posting on Facebook about being so proud of Connor and Zoe's college achievements. Connor went to an expensive private school for engineering, and Zoe went to a prestigious liberal arts college out of state. Both schools cost more per year than Dad claimed to make in child support. I started getting suspicious and did some digging. Through mutual friends and some social media sleuthing, I found out that Dad had been paying full tuition for both stepkids the entire time he was telling us he couldn't help with our education. When I confronted him about it last year, he got defensive and said, "That's different because Connor and Zoe didn't have other options for financial support, while Mom and I could figure it out." He said their biological father doesn't pay child support, so Dad felt responsible for them in a way he didn't for us because we had Mom. That hurt, but I tried to let it go. I figured maybe there was more to the story that I didn't understand. Fast forward to this past month. Mia is now 19 and starting her sophomore year of college. She's been struggling financially even more than Jake and I did because tuition keeps going up. She's working 25 hours a week on top of full-time classes, barely sleeping, and her grades are suffering. She finally broke down and called Dad, begging for help. Even just a few $100s a month would make a huge difference. She was crying on the phone, telling him about how she sometimes skips meals to save money and how she's worried about not being able to afford textbooks. Dad's response? The same old song and dance about being financially stretched and how college costs are just a reality of life. He suggested she might want to consider transferring to a cheaper school or taking a break to work full-time. Meanwhile, I found out through Sarah's Instagram that they just bought Connor a brand new car as a graduation gift and are paying for Zoe to study abroad in Italy this semester. I completely lost it. I called Dad and told him exactly what I thought about his priorities. I said it was disgusting that he could watch his biological children struggle with basic necessities while funding his stepkids' dream experiences. I pointed out that he'd spent more on Connor's car than he'd contributed to all three of our educations combined. Dad tried to give me the same excuse about the stepkids needing more support, but I wasn't having it. I told him that was bullshit, and he knew it. The real issue was that he'd checked out as a father the moment he got divorced and decided his new family was more important than his original kids. Then I said something I probably shouldn't have. I told him he was a terrible father and that his grandchildren would never know him because he'd proven he couldn't be trusted to love all his family equally. Dad went silent for a long moment, then said I was being dramatic and manipulative by bringing up hypothetical grandchildren. He said he'd done his legal obligation by paying child support and that anything beyond that was a gift, not a requirement. That's when I really exploded. I told him that being a father meant more than meeting legal minimums and that Mom had been carrying the load for both parents for years while he played daddy to someone else's kids. The conversation ended with Dad hanging up on me. Within hours, I was getting texts from Sarah and both stepkids telling me I was out of line. Sarah sent a long message about how I don't understand their family dynamics and that Dad has been nothing but generous to Connor and Zoe because they needed stability after their father abandoned them. The irony was apparently lost on her that Dad had also abandoned his kids, just in a different way. Connor texted me saying I was jealous and ungrateful, and that Dad didn't owe us anything now that we were adults. Zoe was more diplomatic, but still said I was being unfair to Dad, and that every family situation is different. But here's what really got to me. Dad posted something on Facebook about ungrateful children who don't appreciate the sacrifices parents make, and some people always looking for someone to blame for their problems. Several family members liked the post, including my dad's brother and sister. Apparently, they all think I'm being unreasonable. Jake called me after seeing the post. He was upset not at Dad, but at me. He said I'd made things worse, and that now Dad would probably be even less likely to help any of us in the future. He thinks I should apologize and try to repair the relationship. Mia is torn. She's grateful that I stood up for us, but she's also worried that I've burned bridges permanently. She still hopes Dad might come around and help her financially, and she thinks my outburst might have ruined that possibility. Mom is trying to stay neutral, but I can tell she's proud of me for finally saying what we've all been thinking for years. She's never badmouthed Dad to us, even though she had every right to after the way he handled the divorce and custody. Some extended family members have reached out. Dad's sister called me to say that I don't know the whole story about Dad's finances and that I should be more understanding. She pointed out that Connor and Zoe didn't choose for their parents to get divorced and that Dad was just trying to give them stability. I pointed out that Jake, Mia, and I didn't choose for our parents to get divorced either, but somehow that didn't earn us the same consideration. Dad's brother was more direct. He said I was being a spoiled brat and that Dad had paid child support for years, which was more than a lot of divorced fathers do. He said I should be grateful for what I got instead of comparing myself to the stepkids. But here's what really bothers me about all this. It's not just about money. It's about the clear message that we weren't priorities in Dad's life after the divorce. When Connor graduated high school, Dad threw him a huge party and invited extended family. When I graduated, Dad came to the ceremony but left immediately after for a prior commitment with Sarah's family. When Zoe was in a car accident sophomore year, Dad took time off work to be with her in the hospital. When Jake broke his leg during a football game, Dad said he couldn't make it to the hospital because he was out of town, but we later found out through social media that he was at Connor's college visiting for the weekend. For birthdays, Connor and Zoe get thoughtful, expensive gifts. We get gift cards or cash, usually a day late with an apology about being so busy. Dad goes to all of Connor's work events and Zoe's art shows. He's missed every single one of my work presentations, Jake's games, and Mia's academic awards ceremonies. It's been this way for 12 years, and I'm just tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. The college money was just the final straw because it's so concrete. You can't argue with the numbers or make excuses about scheduling conflicts. Dad chose to pay full tuition for his stepkids while his biological children took on crushing debt. What makes it worse is that both Connor and Zoe come from money on their mother's side. Sarah's parents are wealthy and have helped with expenses too. Sarah herself makes good money as a marketing director. They weren't struggling the way Mom was as a single parent working multiple jobs. Meanwhile, Mom had to choose between groceries and utilities some months. She never went on vacation, never bought herself anything nice, never even went out with friends because every penny went to supporting us kids. And Dad knew this. He saw the cheap clothes we wore to his house, heard us talk about Mom's work stress, knew we were eating ramen for dinner most nights. But apparently, that wasn't his problem to solve because he was busy being father of the year to his bonus kids. I've been thinking a lot about what Dad said about legal obligations versus gifts. Technically, he's right that child support covered his legal requirement. But morally? Emotionally? What kind of father watches his children struggle and chooses not to help when he has the means? I know some people will say that once kids turn 18, parents don't owe them anything. And maybe that's true legally. But Connor and Zoe were already adults when Dad started paying their college tuition. If it was really about age, he wouldn't have helped them either. The double standard is so obvious it hurts. Dad bent over backward to give his stepkids every advantage, while telling his biological kids to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. What really gets me is how he's rewritten history. In his mind, he's this generous, supportive stepdad who stepped up for kids who needed him. He's conveniently forgotten that he also had kids who needed him, but he chose to prioritize his new family instead. I keep wondering if I went too far by calling him a terrible father. Part of me feels guilty, because I know divorce is complicated and maybe there were financial things I didn't understand. But then I think about Mia crying on the phone about skipping meals while Dad posts vacation photos from his trip to Europe with Sarah and the stepkids. I think about Jake working 40 hours a week while in school because Dad couldn't help with living expenses. I think about myself taking on $60,000 in student loans while Dad paid Connor's tuition without blinking. Maybe I was harsh, but I wasn't wrong. The thing that hurts most is that Dad doesn't seem to understand why I'm upset. He genuinely seems to think he fulfilled his parental duties by paying child support and showing up to our house every other weekend. He doesn't see that parenting is about more than legal minimums. It's about being present for the important moments. It's about helping your kids succeed when you have the ability to do so. It's about making your children feel valued and prioritized. Dad did all of that for Connor and Zoe. He just didn't do it for us. My friends have been supportive, especially the ones who also come from divorced families. Several of them have similar stories about parents who remarried and shifted their priorities to the new family. It's apparently more common than I realized. But I also have friends who think I should try to rebuild the relationship with Dad. They point out that holding grudges only hurts me in the long run and that family is important even when it's complicated. I go back and forth on this. Part of me wants to apologize and try to have some kind of relationship with Dad, even if it's not what I wish it could be. But another part of me thinks I've spent enough years making excuses for his behavior and accepting crumbs of affection. Sarah texted me again yesterday, asking if we could all sit down and talk like adults to work through our misunderstandings. She suggested family therapy, which honestly made me laugh because Dad refused family therapy during the divorce when we actually could have used it. Now that his reputation is at stake, suddenly he's open to working on family dynamics. I haven't responded to Sarah's text yet because I'm not sure what I want. Do I want to repair this relationship? Or am I done trying to get emotional support from someone who's made it clear I'm not a priority? Jake thinks I should at least try the family therapy route. He says even if nothing changes, at least we'll have tried everything. Mia is less optimistic, but agrees it might be worth a shot. Mom says she'll support whatever I decide, but reminds me that I can't control Dad's behavior, only my own response to it. I'm supposed to give Sarah an answer about the family meeting by this weekend. Part of me thinks it's pointless because Dad has had 12 years to figure out how to be an equal parent to all his kids, and he's consistently chosen not to. Why would that change now? But another part of me wonders if I'll regret not trying one more time. The weird thing is that Connor and Zoe aren't bad people. They were just teenagers when all this started, and they didn't ask for Dad to favor them over us. Connor's actually reached out privately to apologize for his initial text and said he's starting to understand why I'm upset. He admitted that he never really thought about how different Dad's treatment of us was because he was just grateful for the support after his biological father left. He said he's been talking to Zoe about it, and they both feel uncomfortable about the favoritism now that it's been pointed out. That makes me feel a little better, but it also makes me sadder in a way. Even his stepkids can see the problem, but Dad apparently can't. I keep coming back to what I said about hypothetical grandchildren, and I think that might have been the truest thing I said during our fight. I'm not planning to have kids anytime soon, but when I do, I can't imagine subjecting them to the kind of unequal treatment I experienced. Why would I let my children get attached to a grandfather who might decide they're less important than someone else's kids? Why would I risk them feeling the same rejection and confusion I felt growing up? That probably sounds dramatic, but watching your parent choose other children over you really does change how you view relationships and family. It makes you question your worth and wonder what's wrong with you that made you less lovable than other kids. I don't want that for my future children. And maybe that makes me unforgiving, but I think protecting my hypothetical kids from that kind of hurt is more important than maintaining a relationship with someone who's proven he can't love equally. So Reddit, AITA for calling out my dad's favoritism and telling him he's a terrible father? Should I apologize and try family therapy? Or am I justified in being done with someone who clearly prioritizes his stepkids over his biological children? TLDR, my dad paid full tuition for his stepkids' expensive colleges while telling me, my brother, and sister that he couldn't help with our education costs. When my sister begged for help with basic expenses, he said no but bought his stepson a new car the same week. I called him a terrible father and said his future grandchildren won't know him because he can't love all his kids equally. Family thinks I went too far, but I'm tired of being treated as less important than his stepkids. AITA for finally calling out 12 years of favoritism?